We all know that feeling, right? You want to really get a handle on something complex, get right to the core, but sometimes the sheer amount of information feels, well, impossible.
Yeah, overwhelming.
Exactly. And that's what we try to do here at the Deep Dive. We take these big topics and pull out the key insights, giving you those aha moments without burying you in data.
And today, we're tackling a really fascinating concept one of you asked about, Go. It's central to Indian philosophy.
Go. Yeah, it sounds simple, but I get the feeling it's got layers.
Oh, absolutely. It pops up everywhere in Indian thought, and its meaning shifts quite a bit depending on the context. So our goal today is to explore those different meanings, see where it's used ancient texts, various philosophical schools, even practical stuff.
Right. And you, our listener, gave us some great material to work with. The Wikipedia page on Gotha, naturally, but also two really interesting articles. One from Swaraja, connecting Indian philosophy and modern science.
Which is a fascinating angle.
Totally. And another from EIM University, giving a broad overview of Indian philosophical systems, especially focusing on the Samkhya school.
Both really useful for context.
So our mission: cut through that complexity, unpack Gona's different meanings, link it to the bigger philosophical picture, and hopefully find some surprising insights about why this ancient idea still matters.
Okay, where do we start?
Well, let's start with the word itself, guna.
Yeah.
In Sanskrit, it's interesting because it functions as both a root and a word.
Okay.
And its meanings are pretty diverse. The Wikipedia source mentions that in older texts, it can mean anything from like a string or thread.
A string.
Yeah, literally.
Oh.
But also things like virtue or excellence, and maybe most commonly quality or property.
Wow, okay. String, virtue, quality. That seems like a huge jump. How do those meanings connect?
It helps to look at the etymology. There's a very early text on Sanskrit etymology, Yaska's Nirukta, and it suggests guna comes from the root gata.
Which means to count or enumerate. So right away, you see this connection to counting, listing, classifying things.
Ah, okay. Like when you classify something, you list its qualities or parts.
Precisely. And that's probably why we see it in prefixes like dviguta, meaning twofold, or triguta, threefold. It's about enumeration, subdivision.
That makes sense. So counting leads to qualities. What about the string idea? That seems quite different.
It does, but think about it. A string connects things, right? Larson and Bhattacharya, scholars mentioned in the Wikipedia entry, suggest this thread metaphor links the reality we can see, the observable stuff, to its deeper, invisible essence, what they call the tattva.
Like a thread running through reality.
Sort of, yeah.
Right.
And this string meaning pops up elsewhere, too. In music, it means a chord. In phonology, the study of sounds, it relates to vowel grades.
Vowel grades. How does that connect?
Well, in phonology and grammar, gut can also mean a mantran-like, addressing or invitation, or abusa, which is habit or practice, repetition.
Repetition, like threading something over and over.
Yeah. Some commentators, like Lingaisurin, make exactly that connection. Repetition, agyasa, links back to the thread idea. And in the Mahabharata epic, gus is used when talking about addressing each part of something, which leads to the meaning avayava, a member, a subdivision, a portion.
Okay, so there's this underlying theme of distinct parts or qualities being connected or enumerated. It's starting to come together.
Right. And then we get to gusa, meaning virtue, merit, excellence.
Which still feels a bit separate.
Maybe less so if you think of virtues as specific, positive qualities or attributes. In texts about dharma, righteous living and liberation, virtues are highly valued characteristics. So it's still about gusa as a defining quality, just in a moral or ethical sense.
I see. A specific kind of quality.
Exactly. And then the most general meaning, the one we see all over the place in different shastras, sutras, epics, even texts about food.
Food.
Yeah, it's used there to mean quality, peculiarity, tendency, attribute, property, species. Basically the inherent nature of something, whether it's a philosophical concept or an ingredient.
Okay, got it. So Gouda is this incredibly flexible term: strings, connections, parts, characteristics, virtues, inherent nature. It covers a lot of ground. Now, how did the different schools of Indian philosophy use this idea?
Now that's where things get really interesting. The Nyaya school, for example, they were big on logic and epistemology. How we know things, they debated the meaning of Gouda extensively.
Okay, what did they conclude?
Well, early on, they identified 17 good, or qualities, but later that list grew to 24 commonly accepted ones.
24.
Yeah, quite specific. Though it's worth noting, not everyone, even within Naya, agreed entirely. A scholar named Bazar Vajna had a slightly different list.
24 qualities.
Hmm.
What sort of things are we talking about? Is it just physical properties?
Oh, it's much broader than that. The Wikipedia page lists them out. You have the obvious sensory ones: color, taste, smell, touch.
Right.
But also more abstract things like number, contact, disjunction, like separation, dimension, farness, nearness, separateness.
Okay, so abstract concepts too.
Definitely. And it goes further. It includes psychological states, knowledge, pleasure, frustration, desire, hatred, even effort, volition.
Wow, so internal states as well.
Absolutely. Plus physical properties like weight, fluidity, viscosity, and dispositional tendencies like inherent inclinations. And even moral qualities like merit and demerit and sound.
That's incredibly comprehensive. It feels like they were trying to map out every possible attribute of reality, inside and out.
That seems to be the goal, yes. A really systematic framework built on these fundamental qualities. And they got into the details too. Udayana, in his Laksanavali, apparently discussed the fine points, like what makes a quality specifically a quality of earth.
Deep stuff. Now, what about the Vaisheshika school? You mentioned they're related to Nyaya. Did they see Gupya the same way?
Closely related, yes, but with a key difference in their overall framework. Vaisheshika talks about 7 Padartha fundamental categories of reality.
7 categories.
Yeah. And Gua, quality, is one of those 7. The others are things like substance, dravya, action, karman, generality, samanya, particularity, vishisha, inherence, samavaya, and sometimes non-existence, apava is included.
So Gua is one category among 7. How's that different from Nyaya's view?
The main difference highlighted in the sources is how they treat samavaya, inherence the relationship between a quality and the substance it belongs to. For Nyaya, inherence is sometimes considered a kind of gu itself. But for Vaisheshika, inherence is its own distinct fundamental category, separate from Gua.
I see. So they both think Gua is fundamental, but they place it differently within their larger map of reality. It shows how even related schools had unique approaches.
Precisely. It highlights the diversity within Indian philosophical thought. And Gucha doesn't stop there. It shows up in Sanskrit grammar and Ayurveda, too.
Grammar. Okay, that's another unexpected turn. How does Gut work in grammar?
In Sanskrit grammar, Gut is a technical term for a specific grade or strength of vowel sound. Think of it as the normal or full grade. It sits between a basic 0 grade and a lengthened Vodi grade.
So like different versions of the same vowel.
Exactly. The Wikipedia page gives the classic example. The vowels, I, U, are the 0 grade. The Gut grade versions are R, E, O, and the Vudi grade, the lengthened ones, are R, I, O.
Interesting. A systematic way to describe vowel changes.
Very systematic. And this isn't unique to Sanskrit, actually. This Gut grade corresponds to what linguists call the full grade in the Indo-European ablaut system.
Blout.
Yeah, it's a pattern of vowel variations you find in related languages like Greek, Latin, even English has remnants of it. Think sing, sang, sung. These grammatical rules for Sanskrit were laid out meticulously by the famous grammarian Patini in his Ashtadhyayi. Ludli, that lengthened grade, is a closely related concept in his system.
Amazing how the same term finds such precise meaning in linguistics. Okay, what about Ayurveda? How does Gut apply to medicine?
In Ayurveda, Guna refers to 20 fundamental properties or qualities that substances can have. They're usually presented as 10 pairs of opposites.
Opposites. Like what?
Things like heavy versus light, cold versus hot, unctuous or oily versus dry, dull versus sharp, smooth versus rough, and so on. There are 10 pairs.
And how are these used?
They're absolutely fundamental in Ayurveda. They're used to assess a person's constitution, diagnose imbalances, which are often seen as an excess of certain gunas, and decide on treatments, including diet. Foods and herbs are classified by their dominant gunas and used to counteract imbalances.
So it's a practical diagnostic and therapeutic tool based on these inherent qualities. Very different from the nihilist, but still focused on quality.
Exactly. It's about understanding the inherent nature of things, food, herbs, the body itself, through these qualities. And interestingly, this Ayurvedic concept of guna connects back to the Samkhya philosophy's idea of the triguna.
The triga.
Yeah.
Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Okay, this feels like a really core part of the Guna discussion. Let's dive into that.
Absolutely. The Samkhya school uses Guka in a very specific and profoundly influential way, quite distinct from Nyaya or Vaisheshika.
Okay.
Samkhya philosophy proposes that Prakriti, which is primordial nature, the basic stuff the universe evolves from, is actually composed of 3 fundamental gusas. These are the Trigua, Sattva, rajas, and tamas.
Sattva, rajas, tamas. We hear these terms a lot, especially in relation to yoga and meditation sometimes. Can you break down what each one represents in Samkhya?
Sure. Sattva is the quality of essence, light, purity, goodness, intelligence, harmony. Think clarity, balance, understanding.
Okay, the positive, clear aspect.
Right. Then you have rajas. This is the principle of activity, energy, change, passion, dynamism. It's the driving force. Think ambition, movement, maybe even restlessness.
The active, energetic principle.
Exactly. And finally, tamas. This represents darkness, inertia, dullness, heaviness, resistance, stability. It can also manifest as lethargy, confusion, or delusion.
The heavy, inert, obscuring principle. So if I'm feeling clear and focused, that's sattva.
That would be a sattva dominant state, yes. If you're feeling driven and energetic, maybe a bit agitated.
That's rajas.
Right. And if you're feeling sluggish, unmotivated, maybe a bit down or stuck.
That's tamas.
That's the idea. And the key thing in Samkhya is that these three aren't just moods. They are the fundamental constituents of Prakriti itself. They're always present in everything, just in different proportions.
So everything in the universe, including our minds, bodies, thoughts, emotions, is a manifestation of the interplay of these three gunas.
Precisely. Their constant interaction, their shifting balance, is what drives the whole evolution of the cosmos, from the physical elements up to our intellect, ego, and senses. The image you shared showing the Sakya evolution makes this clear. Prakriti at the top, then intellect, buddhi, then ego sense, hamkara. And from the ego sense, depending on whether sattva or tamas dominates, you get the evolution of the mind, sense organs, action organs, and the subtle and gross elements.
It's a really elegant, comprehensive model. And the Swarajya article mentioned Samkhya possibly connecting with modern scientific ideas.
Yes, it draws some parallels, particularly around the idea that the observer shapes reality, which resonates with some interpretations of quantum physics, though we need to be careful not to overstate those connections. It also mentions Spinoza and how some 19th century German scholars saw links between his work and Vedanta.
And Vedanta was influenced by Samkhya's Trigua theory.
Heavily influenced, yes.
Yeah.
Vedanta, which focuses more on the ultimate reality and the self, adopted and adapted the Trigu concept significantly.
It's fascinating how these ideas travel and resonate across time and cultures. The Swarajya piece also mentions Samkhya's dualism being different from Western mind-body dualism.
Yes, that's a really crucial point. Western dualism, like Descartes, often posits mind and matter as two fundamentally different substances. This leads to the tricky problem of how they interact.
Right, the mind-body problem.
Exactly. But in Samkhya, the mind, intellect, ego, senses is actually considered an evolute of Prakriti, which is the material principle. So mind isn't a separate substance, it arises from matter.
So mind is still material in a sense.
In the sense that it originates from Prakriti, yes. It's a subtle form of matter. This avoids the classic interaction problem because mental events and physical events both ultimately stem from the same source, and it's gutsas.
That's a really different way of looking at it. The EIM University article also brought us something interesting. Classical Samkhya is often described as atheistic.
That's generally correct for the classical formulations. Early Samkhya texts, like the Samkhya Karika, don't rely on a creator god to explain the universe. They argued that an unchanging god couldn't create a changing world, and the interaction between Purua pure consciousness and Prakriti with its gutas was sufficient explanation.
So Puru isn't God in this system.
No, Purua is pure, inactive, witnessing consciousness. And importantly, classical Samkhya posits multiple individual Puras, one for each sentient being, rather than a single universal consciousness or God. This interaction between the inactive Puru and the active Prakriti is what kicks off the evolution driven by the Godas.
Wow. A complete cosmology without a creator god. It's quite a self-contained system.
It is, and incredibly influential, as we said. The Triguta concept, in particular, spread far and wide within Indian thought. The EIM article rightly points out Sankhya's ancient roots, finding mentions in the Upanishads and the Mahabharata, showing its long history.
So the Gouda concept, especially the Trigud, clearly had a massive impact. But like any major philosophical system, I assume it faced critiques and generated debate.
Oh, absolutely. Indian philosophy has a rich tradition of debate, Shastratha. While our sources don't go deep into critiques, some standard points of discussion involve Samkhya's core dualism.
Like how Puru and Paki, these two eternal independent principles, start interacting in the first place.
Exactly. What triggers the evolution? How does inactive consciousness influence active matter? And the idea of multiple puros was debated too, especially by schools like Advaita Vedanta, which argues for a single ultimate reality, Brahman.
Right, those fundamental questions about the nature of reality and consciousness.
These debates were crucial for the development of all the schools. As the EILM article notes, even the orthodox schools that accepted the authority of the Vedas has significant disagreements on metaphysics and epistemology.
Which makes the whole landscape incredibly rich and dynamic.
Yeah.
So let's bring this back home for you, our listener. You wanted to gain knowledge efficiently, get those aha moments. Why is understanding Go so valuable for that?
Because Gut, in its various forms, is like a master key. Understanding it unlocks doors to so many different areas of Indian thought, whether you're looking at metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, psychology, Ayurveda, even grammar. Gut is often there playing a crucial role.
It really is one of those concepts that once you grasp it, you start seeing connections everywhere. It helps make sense of the bigger picture within the Indian intellectual tradition, gives you those aha moments we talked about.
Definitely. And while you could spend a lifetime exploring the nuances in just one school, getting a handle on the basic meanings of Gana, especially the Trigona framework from Samkhya, provides a really solid foundation. It gives you a structure to hang things on so it doesn't feel quite so overwhelming.
It's a starting point that equips you for deeper exploration if you want to go there.
Precisely. It makes the journey much more manageable and rewarding.
Okay, so let's quickly recap our deep dive on Guna. We've seen it's this incredibly multifaceted term, meaning everything from literal strings and threads,
To abstract qualities, virtues, inherent tendencies.
and ultimately, in Samkhya, the three fundamental constituents of all reality: sattva, rajas, and tamas.
We saw how different schools like Nyaya and Vaisheshika classified qualities differently, how guna functions in Sanskrit grammar, and as a practical tool in Ayurveda.
And we touched on its deep influence on later philosophies like Vedanta, and even some intriguing, though tentative, parallels with Western thought.
It really is a concept that weaves through so much.
So here's a final thought for you to mull over. How might this idea of fundamental qualities or inherent tendencies, gingdas, shape how you understand the world around you, your own experiences, maybe even your field of work or interest? Do you see Gutten-like principles operating in your own life?
It's something to reflect on, and if this dive into the world of Buddha has piqued your interest, you could definitely explore further, maybe look deeper into the Samkhya philosophy and the Trigatha theory, or perhaps the detailed list of qualities from the Nyaya school.
Lots more to discover there.
Always.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive for today. We really hope you found it insightful, maybe even uncovered a surprise or two.
Hope to have you with us next time.
Yeah, join us next time as we tackle another complex topic and search for those illuminating insights.